Hello, this is Lady B, and this week I want to show you some really simple techniques you can use for painting 3D ceramic models. Now, the type I'm talking about is you go to the craft store and they'll have either figurines or houses or just little things that you can paint. And it's very intimidating. So I thought it could be great to show you these just 3 steps to make it look really nice. Now I'm painting a house, and the houses are most commonly found at Christmas time. And the techniques I'm using here can work for Christmas. It will work for any figurine, whether it's a house or any type of model. But in this case, because of the time of year, I'm doing a haunted house. And I have a picture I can put up right here of what it looked like when I bought it. Now, these houses come often with a little light that you can put underneath it to light it up from inside. They'll have openings for the windows. And they come with these little teeny paint pots. And I don't like these. I don't. These are the cheapest paints you can get. They're really intended for children. And if you bought the figurine for your child to paint, by all means, let them use it. But I'm going to keep this for when I paint with my nieces and nephews, and I'm not using it on this. Instead, I'm going to be using my craft paints that I have bought. They're still cheap, but not that cheap. So, before you paint, however, the very first thing you need to do is to prime it. And your choices in primer is white, gray, and black. And it's very important to prime it. You get a much better result if you've primed it. I recommend, if you don't know what you're going to be painting your house to look like, go with the gray. It's a nice neutral color. It will still do the lights and it will still do the darks. If you're going to be doing a very bright house, stick with a white. If you're going to be painting something really dark, go with the black. Like I said, I went with the gray, and I have a picture of that here too. After I primed it gray, I then went in and painted a black prime layer on all the areas that were going to be really dark. This is just going to help my darker colors be more opaque, look better with less coats, because I really don't want to do a lot of coats. And I don't imagine you do either. Like I said, simple techniques. But there's my prime job, so you can see it. And this is what I'm painting. So now that it's primed, it's time to paint. Okay, so we have our paint surface. I have my gloves to keep the paint colors I'm allergic to off my hands. We have a variety of brushes. If you do not have one, you are going to want a brush that is wide and flat like this. See how it's really flat? That you don't care about. If you don't have one, get one. I will be showing you how to use it later. But whatever you get, it needs to be something you don't care about. Buy cheap in this case. You don't want to buy an expensive brush for this, but you will need one. You need the paint palettes. I have multiple here. And a water cup, paper towel for damping off, and I have a variety of paints just out of camera to use. So the first step painting wise is to do what I call color blocking. And what that is I'm going to go in and I'm just going to paint a flat color in each of these areas of what I want them to be. I'll be doing green here, purple for my roof, blue for my siding, an off-white on my stucco areas. I haven't decided on the shutters, and so forth. So that is where I'm going to start. Now I am going to paint, because of the way the model is, I'm going to try and paint from the bottom up. I'm also going to try and paint from the back forward. So, for example, where there's this tree here, I'll want to paint these things behind the tree first and then come in and paint the tree. And that way, if I get stuff on the tree that's the paint in the back, it won't matter. because I can just paint over it when I paint the tree. So let's get started. It's the next day and it's finished. It took a few hours, but here's the results. Now you can see how I didn't try to do any real details. All I did was just paint every individual thing a flat color. Just a basic color, a Tuscan red for my bricks, purple for my roof, blue for the shingles, an ivory white for my stucco and limestone, green trim, brown trees, white ghost, you know, the basics. And I showed this to my sister. I'm like, look, it's finished. And she's like, it looks like a child's drawing. And it kind of does. At this point, it's just really basic. And this is what you're going to get when you use these acrylics. And I know that intimidates a lot of people because they think, well, it's never going to look better than this. That's the best I can do. Because there's this idea that you have to go in and do a whole bunch of little details to make it look really good. But you don't. The next step for this, the technique I wanted to teach you, first technique, is called washing. And what that is you thin down your paint to about the consistency of milk. And then you paint with it, and the idea is it creates a translucent layer. And you can get some really pretty effects with doing shades just a little darker than each of your individual ones if you want to get really detailed. But that's not what we're doing. It's a really, really simple trick. Now, there is a trick to it. The key is that you can't just thin it with water. If you do, the surface tension will cause your pigments in your paint to pool, and you'll get a splotchy look. So in miniature painting, where you paint little figures and things, I have one. Let me show you. Little figures. They have tricks for this. And one of them is, the oldest one in the book, is to just drop a drop or two of dish soap in your water to break the water tension, because that splotchiness is caused by water tension. So you need to break the water tension. And that kind of works. But there are ways that are better. Now, there's a home recipe you can do. And that's what this is. This bottle was actually originally a flow medium. And a flow medium or a floating medium is actually perfect for this, and I will get to that next. But after we used the flow medium that came in the bottle, we made our own. And what this is it's half and half Windex and distilled water with a drop or two of Dawn dish soap. And you get really good results with this combination. And the blue, yes, it's blue, but it doesn't affect the color of the paint that you're using at all. Not at all. You don't end up with bluish paint. Now, there is ammonia in Windex, and some acrylic paints will react badly to it. So there's a couple of solutions for that. You can either buy the Windex without ammonia. It's kind of purple. Same thing, won't affect the color of your paint. Or you can buy the flow medium or the floating medium. They're not identical, but it's whichever you can get. If you're using a paint and you're buying a flow medium or floating medium, buy the one that goes with the paint. It's most likely to not react with your paint. And this is the folk art one, because a lot of my paints I'm using are folk art. And it's the floating medium. And the thing about these is they're used to do shading in acrylics. There's these tricks and techniques you can use combined with this to paint a gradation from darker to lighter when you're trying to imitate things like watercolor using acrylics. You can also use this to create a wash, but it's too thick to use it by itself. So you have to cut it half and half with distilled water. Now you don't have to have a gallon of water, obviously. And I have a cup here, I'm going to put some in. But the point is, it's a half and half. You don't use this straight up if you're doing a wash. So I'll show you how to make that wash and how to use it right now. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix my color, and I want a dark brown for this. Because this is a haunted house, I'm going to do kind of an antiquing effect. So I want even darker than my darkest brown. My darkest brown I have here is coffee bean. And then I have a black. And I'm going to mix these two colors to get the color I want. And it doesn't take much. I'm now going to thin that. And I'm going to use half. And you can see how thick this is. It's very thick. Of the floating medium. And then half distilled water. Some people will actually put the distilled water in a pump. So they can just pump out as they need it. Now I'm going to paint on my cloth here so you can see just how thin this is. See, it looks almost like watercolor. So what we're doing now that I have this really thin is you're going to be painting, but you're painting across the sections where you have these details, because the sculpt has all these little details. There's the shutters, there's the lines inside the brick, the lines on the tree, all of this stuff. And the thing that the wash will do is not only will it tint the paint that's already there, it will settle into the cracks and crevices and make a darker color, thereby creating a shading. Now the key to doing this is that you do it, like I said, you do it across the grain, because you want it to settle into those cracks. Like that. So you can see if that shows up. The bottom compared to the top. How that now has these darker spots in the chimneys and such. And it's okay if it's a little dark, because the next technique I'm going to do will lighten it. And you just do it across your whole figure. A little bit of this goes a long way. And I'm just going to literally paint everything with this. Okay, so this is how it turned out. It's dried now. And I'm going to be honest, I am not actually entirely happy with this. It hasn't settled into the cracks as well as I would like. Has tinted everything, which is what the floating medium is supposed to do, but it hasn't settled into the cracks. So I'm actually going to do this again, and I'm going to use my home version, and we're going to see the difference. Now, I've already mixed a little bit of my brown and my black here, and so now I'm going to do it again, and we're going to see if this settles into the cracks properly. And that is working. So sometimes the home version is best. Now, the reason I'm holding this upside down while I'm doing this is because the shingles, the part that the dark part is supposed to go into, is actually up. So by holding it upside down, I'm allowing it to run into those spots. Now I have to let that dry, and then we'll take another look at it. And that worked much better. I don't know how well it's showing, but you can see how it's filled in the cracks and made them darker. Now, because I had to do 2 coats, this is darker than I would prefer, but it's okay because the next step will fix that. And that is the next technique, which is called dry brushing. Now, this is why I said in the beginning you needed to buy a brush that you didn't care about, because this is going to thrash your brush, but it's also going to bring the colors back. What is dry brushing? Dry brushing is literally painting with a dry brush. So I'm going to show you with the white, the areas that were this ivory to start with. So I take some of my ivory and I put it in my pot. And then I take my brush and I'm going to dip it in my ivory. I'm going to brush off as much of it as I can on the palette, and then I'm also going to brush off most of it onto the paper, and then I'm going to come over it and I'm just going to flick over the top and just go like this. And we just flick. Now, this chimney pot isn't a good place for you to see how it works because the surface is flat. But it's a good place to show you the technique. It's a back and forth flicking. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you that same thing. Evidently, I had some liquid in there that hadn't dried yet. Here is going to be easier because there's textures in here where we have the fence. Because what the dry brushing does is it does the opposite of the wash. With the wash, it creeps into all the little cracks and crevices and it creates shadows. But dry brushing, done correctly, only goes across the top. And it highlights the details while not touching the shadows. So where it's flat, it doesn't really show much. But say on these fences, now we have these details, but we still have the shadows provided from the other technique. And if you get paint somewhere you don't want, you can always grab a damp brush, like I just did. Just grab a damp brush and wipe it up with the damp brush. Because these acrylics are water soluble. You can just wipe it up. Any mistakes, just take it off before it dries, and it will come right off with a little water on your brush, on a clean brush. There's my limestone back. Let's get the ghosts real quick, because I want to see those ghosts back too. 'Cause right now they're really dark. So there's our ghosts back. And so you can see how those are starting to pop. Now it's really going to stand out on this roof. I need to put my gloves on now because of my allergies. I'm going to be handling colors I'm allergic to. You want to, again, work from the back to the front. So the first thing in these other colors I want to do is my blue. So I have this really dark blue, and under the blue, over the blue, we now have this darker black. I'm going to take a lighter blue, and again, just barely a little bit on the brush. I'm getting a bunch off on my paper towel. I'm now going to come in and just lightly brush it. And it's finished. One haunted house using color blocking, wash, and a dry brush. So you can see it all the way around. 3 basic techniques, easy techniques you can use to make your 3D models look like they have more depth and more detail. Let's do that again. And this comes with a light. So there it is, finished. My model of a haunted house. Give it a try. You'll be surprised just how easy this is to do. I love all of you, whether new or old. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Until then, whether trying this or something else, just remember, don't be afraid to suit yourself and make whatever it is exclusively yours.